Yeah, I'm just going to get a quick look at this lighting right here, see if I want to gather and acquire some valuable information. Yeah. So like anyway, so like I'm just taking a quick look at it and decide if I'm really going to even feel like it. But anyway, yeah. So like um yeah. Okay. I think I'll just go ahead and just start something. I was referring to a commercial of Free Sky for Rocky Pro, and the guy is actually advertising the bike in the commercial. And I'm thinking he might have been involved with copier machines. I'm actually trying to place it. Um, but anyway, there's like this connectivity between the General Motors Vortex. It's actually spelled with an X. I've seen it both with an X and a C. The Vector and the Vortec with a C, with the letters rearranged, is like they're both 83, okay? And like a vector and rasters for like, geographic information systems, normally involving, like axes. More so, I think on the geometry side with like arcing slopes, if my memory serves me correctly, for like a 3D imagery involving cardiography. I'm not sure if it's pronounced that way. I'm actually trying to remember actually how it's pronounced, but it's similar to that. It's 3D imagery, and I'm thinking if my memory serves me correctly that the vectors and rasters, I think it's the rasters, are like geometric with like kind of like arcing slopes for like the 3D imagery. And I'm not sure if they're all that way or just that uh, specific word for like 3D imagery involving, I think it's pronounced cardiography or something like that. But anyway, yeah. So like but at the same time, the General Motors like Vortec and the Vector is kind of like I'm just now it's kind of like thinking about that because it's kind of like the McDonald's Golden Arches, both half cycles above the degree level like rotocenters and concentric participation, and 1 cycle per second in oscillation, half above and half below. With the center line of oscillation. Yet the principle like both half cycles being side by side like McDonald's Golden Arches in one viewpoint, and pronunciation is like the half cycle above and below of 1 cycle per second. It's like the electronic schematic fish when it's like side by side. Looks different, pronounced the same. And the thing with this is that the Vortec engine, okay, with like the Chevrolet Silverado, I've seen it both ways. Is really what it is. I'm almost for certain I've seen it spelled both ways. The Vortex with the N, the last letter being X and the last letter being C, and the vector. It's kind of like it's kind of like all this information is kind of like kind of going on in my mind about alphanumerics. It's almost sometimes it's almost automatic. And actually it's kind of like when it's kind of like going through my mind. It's kind of like, hey, that's like they're like both 83. It's automatically. I've been thinking quite a bit about that electronic schematic vision and symbolic representation of like absolute Christianity. A lot of people put that on their car to represent like Christianity, and I think about the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi, and an affirmative fallopian tube and the biggest mouth of the river, and all that stuff about the electronic schematic triangle representing the delta force, the biggest mouth of the river, and the triangle representing the delta being the thing about you know the biggest mouth in like every way, yeah. Even in communications, yeah. So like in any case, I was kind of like thinking about that because the way it was all combined. Um, they got advertising. I was thinking about there during the Stargate program. Like I mentioned several times, like several things is how many times I'm not real sure, or a duration of like you know completely huh, yeah, the thing about freeze frame, yeah, for real, yeah. So like anyway, yeah. So like anyway, so like I was kind of like thinking about that because when I actually realized, okay, something about a principle of wide area network, not really um the network, but just I mean like anywhere, you know, like a network. I mean like anywhere in the not necessarily the entire area, but like a network. I mean a wide area network. And it became like virtually anywhere, with that perception like that. And world news was like kind of like throwing information like once again of a covert mission, and at the same time, it's like at an electronics, uh, an electrical electronic engineering apprenticeship that was actually given a test. Okay, I just went out there to do it. Okay, in any case, I did it twice at 2 different times, years apart, okay? But both times World News was presenting on World News the covert mission. Yet the location of that one particular test was like far beyond any apprentice. I mean, and a graduate like a journeyman, and it's normally at a minimum, um, of a journeyman to be like right at a bachelor degree. 4 years of specialization in that direction, whatever like unit it is. But the one particular international electronic engineering test, I mean, I almost immediately like recognized it. I was like, God, and it like involves sequencing. And at the time, I recognized it as sequencing. I at the time I wasn't doing and focusing on like quantum as far as alphanumerics 107 or this county road or anything about Diners Club back then. I mean, this is like years and years and years ago. But anyway, so like the street's name is like Covern, and the difference between covert and Covern is like T and N. It's the difference of 6. And I'd mentioned, that 6 had been like an ongoing factor with, the numerical and alphanumeric value between 6 being 6 numerically and like 52 alphanumerically, when it's spelled out SIX, okay? And the thing with it is that, it's kind of like wondering about the that in relation between like Marcus Welby and Quincy, and the television series presenting, Quincy like sequencing and other information, and like J.D. Powers, the difference between like J and D is like 6, okay? In any case, so like all those things were like going through my mind, okay? And I just want to kind of mention that because it seemed to be that Vortec engine like seemed to be like the thing about Moby, like the disc jockey, okay, but like like Moby Dick's like a whale, okay. And certain type of lighting, like in the Bryan Adams video, with like the black and blue. Actually, in my mind's eye, the thing that I'm referring to is like my mind's eye, okay, of a Stargate program, okay. And I'm thinking that in my memory, I didn't see like a projecting light like it does in the video. But, it's kind of like the transparency of an effect of like a transparent silk screen or like a hologram. Now, in the video, you can see like in the background what would be like behind a transparent silk screen. And the light being projected on. I mean, it's showing that a light looks like a projector behind it, but it's like somewhere in my mind I I don't remember seeing that about it other than like the whales, okay? And it looks like out in the middle of a field, in the middle of the night, out in the middle of a field, where it's at. I mean, I'm not even sure. I mean, like at all. But I remember the whales, and it's showing the deal about the dolphins. I don't remember really anything about the dolphins. And I think really in my mind, it's automatically think about, a little bit of humor about, Moby Dick and the FDIC and a radio disc jockey in the Houston area, like back in the 80s, Moby, for like KLOL 101.1 FM rock radio station, and likewise in addition, 97 Rock did a lot of, beach run, like simulcast broadcasts like on the beach, East Beach and like Stewart Beach, and in any case, so like it goes on and on about that, but it seemed to be that the whales was like something in my mind. And the meaning of like just the memory is kind of like it just seemed to be the only thing really about the mind's eye being a 35-year period, and seemed to be like different points of origin would really present likewise in addition 35 years with the actual spelling of the I, and the thing about it. But anyway, I just wanted to include that because of the vector and Vortec, excuse me. Because the connection with all this information is kind of like seemed to be that like Chevrolet IROC Z28 and the Free Sky Rocky Pro, and it seemed to be that the Free Sky Rocky Pro represents the idea of like Jesus knew you before the foundations of the earth, or a foundation, and the rock one way, the Rocky Pro, as compared to the Free Sky, and it's almost like the American Idol going beyond, like the Department of Transportation and moving vehicles of like an American Idol situation going beyond like an internet protocol of local area network of maritime law, and it's almost like it presents the American Idol that way, being like on a taxi for like either a helicopter or a jet, or on the runway fixing take off, yet like doesn't require a pilot's license. taxing like the American Idol. It doesn't require, license, yet at the same time, like a glider actually is a pilot that doesn't require a license. And there's certain factors, there seem to be like the J. Edgar Hoover thing about the hover and the hoover, the hoover and the hovercraft. And it seemed to be like all really kind of like originating, from the, after the third day, Lord Jesus Christ resurrected and went to Mount Olives, okay? And then ascended and re-entered heaven, okay? And it's almost like the American Idol. I mean, it's almost like in my mind, the thing about, getting above, maritime law. And it seemed to be like, really, it seemed to be the difference between like monetary and domestic of whether if appreciation or depreciation. It's just the issue of whether or not if litigation, the fact that Richard habeas corpus, or, storage area network, SAN software, like international financial management, is going to be some idea and or including both or neither nor, or, like one or the other of like a SAN software being like securities and annuities network as compared to storage area network. And all this information is kind of like they didn't find it presented, SAN software that way. It was predominantly, other than, me studying like Westlaw, I got Westlaw, for free. It was either a 3 week to like a, maybe close to 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. I don't really remember, but I mean, I got it for free for a while, and I was like doing it like all the time. And, I was really focusing on securities and annuities and like intellectual property and, anything I could find, really about the FDIC as far as like claims and loss prevention and, like international monetary funding and yay aggregates and all that stuff for as long as I could because I got it for free. And I was trying to get it and I got it, okay? So like I really spent a lot of time for a short while, but long enough that, yeah, so like anyway, so like it's kind of like doing that for a while. But anyway, yeah, so like the thing about the vector and the Vortec, it's somewhere in my mind, okay, because like Bryan Adams has that song "Cuts Like a Knife," and just knowing that, okay, because I've been to like one of Bryan Adams' concert in the Summit, and it's like a real good show. I mean, he puts on like a real good show, and that was like, I mean, really a good show when he was in the Summit. But anyway, yeah, so like I was thinking about that because it seemed to be the the vector color he was referring to, silverware of like chefs and cutlery. Well, anyway, so like it just seemed that all that information and the black and blue thing about it and the wells is kind of like automatically starting to look like the Chevrolet Camaro like IROC Z28 and the thing about Moby being the thing about the whale and some idea about Moby being the thing about the front lines of the beach, right? And Moby Dick about the FDIC and all that information just seemed to be him going to 97 Rock and it seemed to be presenting the issue between the IROC Z28 and Rock Me Amadeus and all that information and it's kind of like sometimes it's kind of like the way things have happened it kind of like it's kind of like the world news being about a covert mission, yet it seemed it'd be like that was just like on the news and the significance of like covert being the T and covert and the location of the International Electronic Engineering like a test involving sequencing and all things that seem to be like being the deal about whether or not if a mechanics lien is being used as a deed restriction or if a medical power of attorney is using a fixer in real estate for a deed restriction or a mechanics lien or any method that would present maybe some idea as a method of holding or loss prevention that would actually, in most people's perception, might not be an experienced one or know really the difference of what loss prevention is, other than maybe having control of information and some idea of generating, the impression of royalties. Loss prevention doesn't always identify anything about like loss prevention as a form of collections or litigation that is some idea whether if de facto is or is not the idea of lifespan. And if only what determines what lifespan is as de facto based upon, writs of habeas corpus being some idea of some kind of producing the evidence. How much constitutional law involving, I mean, if ratifying and codifying U.S. constitutional law is only the thought of a writ of habeas corpus, I mean, the deal about the whole entire situation, I mean, is it really the idea of, Annette Pinicello is really Pinocchio, or the idea of like a legal media or deposition, or what that really is? I mean, it seemed to be like whether or not if just a deposition is like, being blindsided about, legal media, um, either knowing or not knowing if a method of banking is even involved with the deposition, hasn't really truthfully ever been, that I'm aware of, been just like ready, available information on television that even involves, programs. It seemed to be like even, like the Quartermains involving depositions, and like General Hospital, and certain other television programs involving, like when they were like in an attorney's office involving depositions. I don't think I've ever seen like any legal or Boston Legal or any like, The Practice or any of them. The Practice was like one of my favorite like attorney movies, okay? But all the times that they were referring to deposition didn't really identify it as maybe a method of banking as loss prevention, only involving what seems to be only involving endorsements of a checking account, or some idea of a degree, non-degree issue between a vice president network, or, the who knows anyway of a virtual personal network. I mean, all that information, it's almost like, being blindsided in one way, and, or, the accusation that, hey, everyone like knows everything about it, and, talking about it, and it doesn't even have a clue everything that's involved with it. But the thing with this is that it's kind of like thinking about that, because it almost seemed to be, the thing about Alpha America sometimes, and now, the certain places involving, like Clear Lake and the El Camino thing about the cutlery, and the black and blue thing is kind of like the Vortec being 83 and 83, and I was kind of like thinking about it. I mean, because, it seemed to be that when that electronic schematic fish, it's like giving a whole new perception of, like, the chapter winners and losers between the McDonald's Golden Arches of degree level representation and consensual participation. And now it seems to be like the thing about Vortec and Vector, somewhere between like geographic information systems, and I haven't quite figured it out if Vortec or Vortex. I'm automatically thinking about the engine, okay, and General Motors, okay. And normally promissory notes is an automatic thing with General Motors. Or if that's going to be some idea of like Robert E. Rubin identifying himself like or on television representing the idea of the United States Secretary of Treasury, or the information in Wall Street Journal, which seems to be the only connectivity of like CitiGroup in Detroit, like General Motors is in Detroit. And General Motors in Detroit is, I mean, the one more so involved with like Defacto, I mean, than any location in the entire United States, representing, like cases that involve like Defacto. Detroit predominantly, the headquarters of General Motors anyway. Everything I was reading in the United States Supreme Court, I decided, to do my homework about Vantage Love 30 and the Alphanumerics like secret Defacto, and, got in, and I chose the United States Supreme Court Southwest Court Reporter for the specific fact of, the Southwest Freeway being, like Code Blue and Southwestern Bell, likewise, at an 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. position, on a 12-hour clock, at the same time, a 247 degree. And also, to think about in my mind, Robert E. Rubin, and a whole bunch of information. But anyway, yeah, so it seemed to be whether or not if Robert E. Rubin being involved with CitiGroup, it's just the connectivity of Detroit. Likewise, General Motors and the promissory note. I might want to look into the promissory notes to see about the similarities. What would normally be some idea of like a annuitized thing about like annuities involving like CitiGroup, or a type that's sometimes involved and identified like in insurance annuities, or the annuities that would be some idea of like generated You know, I don't know if I would call it. It would just have to be registered as a registered charity. I don't think it's the same. Um, Seems that registered charity is more on the side of like gifts, um, as compared to like a annuity. But anyway, so I'm gonna have to actually think about, the annuity as compared to a registered charity. Um, I'm thinking about CitiGroup and between like General Motors like promissory notes, or if it's going to really be like the issue of like a geographic information systems like OnStar is for like General Motors. And the thing, if the vectors and rasters is going to like identify like a like OnStar involving like global positioning systems and tracking systems. Um, in any case, so like it's just something I was thinking. I was kind of like wanting to make a note about that right now, uh, because of the similarities of Vector and Vortec. It's almost in my mind symbolically like the McDonald's golden arches and the electronic schematic fish in one cycle, half above and below, becoming like the idea of like the Mississippi being the misappropriation allocation, yet at the same time an affirmative fallopian tube. I mean, for real. And the umbilical cord thing, or the thing about the mother lode and space exploration. And in any case, so like it seemed to be quite a bit about the word relation between like once again, yeah. Um, um, Architecture and platform, embedding encryption. Okay. In any case, it's already getting late. It's already gone like 21 minutes, but I kind of like wanted to make a note about that because I want to kind of like think about, Robert E. Rubin again and the thing about the alphabetics between McDonald's golden arches, and now it's kind of like the Vector and Vortec and General Motors and OnStar and the promissory notes and General Motors Acceptance Corporation and the promissory notes as compared to, um, the, the thing about Annuity and Citigroup, representing some idea somewhere between like secret Defacto, or Vanceslav 30 and the connectivity like promissory notes as compared to litigation, Defacto, and risk of habeas corpus. But anyway, I wanted to think about that real quick, and I'm going to decide if I'm going to actually upload this or not, but I wanted to make a quick recording just to think about the Vortec being the idea of like OnStar and VSAT communications and global positioning systems and similarities of like geographic information systems, of a place that was identified as vector, yet involving the sales of like silverware, cutlery for like beef. Yeah, all right. Yeah, so like just some information in that immediate area seemed to be combined at a different location at a different day. But anyway, I just want to keep that in mind real quick. But anyway, there it is. Yeah.